And in the hood, an individual might go without, but when we are together collectively, it's amazing the things that we get together. And so I really did want to restore and reclaim the honor of being a part of a hood and of understanding the power of a hood.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Bookmark Live at Black Writers Weekend. We are at this incredible venue powered by Black Writers Weekend and the Riverside Epicenter. We are thrilled to have Miss Tammy here as we celebrate and uplift voices and stories of Black writers. I am Paula, your host. Miss Tammy, welcome to Atlanta, first of all.
Okay.
How you feeling today?
I love it here. I'm feeling really good. I've actually been to Black Writers Weekend once before, but as a guest. So this is my first time here as a writer, and it's amazing.
I love that.
Yeah.
So since you brought that up, right, I'm curious, what makes it different coming in as a guest and now as a writer for you and your soul?
You know what's funny is I always thought that this was a lot of work for writers to appear and discuss your book and sell it and market it. But I found myself doing more work when I was a guest because I was taking a lot of notes. And I wanted to know how they got up there. I wanted to know who published them. I want to know how they did it. So being able to be here and already having a book, I'm actually just really enjoying myself and having fun talking to other writers and meeting people that are locals, things like that. I love it.
I love that. And you were speaking too, right?
Yes, I just did my little discussion.
Don't call it little. Come on now. Put some respect on that. There ain't nothing little about that.
I just did my big ass discussion.
There you go. Put some respect on that shit. So how does it feel speaking at Black Writers Weekend? As again, you said last time you came as a guest, this time you're a book, you're a speaker, you're here on this podcast. How does it feel?
You know what? I'm always grateful to talk about hood wellness to anybody who is interested, but there really is no better audience than other Black writers because the content is vulnerable, but also there's a very specific structure to the book. And as you know, a lot of reviews have noted, it's unique in that sense. So I really love being able to talk to Black writers about how it pays off to be creatively bold and to tell your story and to own it in a way where it can connect with others. I enjoyed it so much.
I love that. And you just literally mentioned Hood Wellness, and that's your book. And when I read, I was like, Hood Wellness, like, I like the name, and it makes me curious, like, what the fuck is Hood Wellness? So can you tell us a little bit about your book and the inspiration behind it?
Yeah. So Hood Wellness is essentially, it's loosely based on my own experiences with wellness, both when I was relying on the Western standard of self-care, as well as when I evolved into communal care. And I use the term hood, I use it literally in the sense that my wellness is very dependent on where I live. I started out in New York, and while I was there, I had incredible housing needs and dental care needs and mental health needs. And so I had to do a lot of fundraising to be able to secure housing in Miami, to take care of my dental care, as well as even transition out of being a food server to being a freelance writer. So it was during these challenges and these experiences that it was very clear to me that wellness, especially when you are Black or any person that navigates a marginalized intersection, it must be communal. There's certain things that we simply cannot do on our own, and self-care is incredibly limiting For example, when you are a Black woman, all the self-care in the world is not going to make up for the discrimination that we face on a daily basis. So what does that look like when we get to the other side of the struggle? What does that look like when we actually have assistance to get the resources that we've been going without? That is the true bottom line of the book, but it is also an incredible collection of inspirational stories of real people of varying different intersections that share what wellness looks like for them and what they've had to do to build their own respective communities.
I love that, and I feel like that's amazing. Me as a creative, like recently I started doing podcasts, so I always get curious, right? Because I remember when I had to come up with the name of my podcast, or anytime I have a project and I have to come up with the name, right? It can be very exhausting because some names can sound, they may sound cute, but then they don't really feel home, because it has to feel like sometimes they're like, yeah, that's a good idea, but something feels like it's missing. Mm-hmm. So when you're coming up with the name of the book, like, how did it really be like, okay, hood wellness, that's it? Like, what was that moment when it came like, that's the name? And did you ever fear, because again, when we're talking about hood, right? Because Black culture, we know what hood is, but then there's also this, you might get some like, God, why did you go right through? Like, mm-hmm. So how did you react to that? Like, when you're creating this, the thoughts that came like, is my anxiety going to be okay when people start looking at me like, hood wellness?
Well, you know what? On a personal level, the hood wellness came about years ago, and it was a joke. It was a hashtag, and it was something that I would use whenever I would have to go to extreme needs, to get something that I needed. And the earliest example I could remember was like way back in 2017, and I bought a pack of chicken. I didn't have enough money for produce, and so I stole it. And I made a beautiful meal, and I took a photo of it, and I was like, I'm so grateful, hashtag hood wellness, because that's what it looked like for me to eat healthy. And then as time was progressing, I started realizing, like, this really isn't a joke. Like, this is actually how I live my life.
It's my life.
And, and if I'm not careful, it could actually take me places I don't want to be. So I wanted to really develop the framework on what it looks like to get by with these limited resources, but also open up the door to show how you can actually get it instead of just dealing with not having it. And regarding the negative connotation, I think that's just how it goes being Black. No matter what we make that is magical, there's always going to be people that say disparaging things about it and invalidate it. And hood, just like ghetto, there are words that are ours, but there's hoods across the world of respected,
neighborhood,
races and ethnicities. And the hood that we know to be Black is truly a respite. The hood is not, it goes both ways. It can get rough, but it also provides a salve. Absolutely. And in the hood, an individual might go without, but when we are together collectively, it's amazing the things that we get together. And so I really did want to restore and reclaim the honor of being a part of a hood and of understanding the power of a hood. And then there's the fact that wellness is very whitewashed. And I always understood that if I'm not careful, I'm going to be sitting on panels with, the white yoga girls. And I'm going to be, this whole framework of survival is going to be reduced to like belly fat and wrinkles, because that's what wellness and body positivity is in the mainstream culture. And so, even the cover of the book, you see an unambiguously Black woman with a bonnet on and bamboo earrings. I
hoops.
Can't,
Bamboo
period.
Hoops.
I can't control who reads and endorses the book, but I can control who I'm speaking to, as well as where I'm showing up to make sure that it gets to the target audience.
I love that. I really love that, and I appreciate you, and even bringing the hood awareness, because, as you said, people have this idea, but they forget that legit the amount of like hood is home. There's some people, however rich they get, they still stick on their hood because those people help. They're those who do it. It's family more than your own family, So yes, there can be some fucked up shit in the hood, but where isn't there some fucked up shit?
Yeah. And also, we think of hood, and a lot of times we think about your neighbor, we think about community watch, we think about, community, even when we think about community, should I say. But what I love about Hood Wellness is that we really open up the door to community, to shining a light on the fact that it really is the people who are supporting you and the people that you have the capacity to support. So for myself, when I needed, for example, to get massive dental care done, my community were the people on the internet, on social media, who were already supporting me. When I got the diagnosis of extreme periodontal disease and I had to have all my teeth removed and replaced with prosthetics, it was my digital community that fundraised for me to have that money to do that. And then there's a story of Joshua, who now he's in his mid-20s, but when he was 8 years old, he was mauled by 2 pit bulls, and that resulted in the loss of 80% of his face. And his community became his entire medical team. Fast forward to nearly 2 decades later, and the same people who were stitching him up and, giving him these very innovative surgical procedures to save his face are the same people that were there at his graduation, the same people that show up for his photo galleries. They are his community. They are his chosen family. And I think that when we open up the door to allowing community to reflect on the people that we have and the people that we can reach, opposed to this, magical idea that it's a bunch of friends who go through thick and thin, that's cool too. And if you've got that, that's great. But for those of us who don't, it's important to be reminded that it doesn't mean we go without. It just means that it's going to look a little different.
And that's so true. And I'm big on community building, and which we're going to get into that because I saw that you're part of that as well. Because I'm a person, and this is something that started once I started getting into podcasting. Yes, you might, as you said, you might have your friends and family, and that's cute. But half of the time, those people don't really be supporting you. They're the ones who don't share your shit. They're the ones who don't come to your fundraising. You have to beg them. They're the ones, but when it's a party, they're there. Mm-hmm. When it's free drinks, free food, dress up. But then the community shows up for you more than anybody. That's why it's really important to embrace these communities and give. And like this book, you're reaching out, but you're also inspiring your own community that if I, with all the struggles I had and everything, the community helped me get here, but look where I am. Right. You can also do it. Like, whatever you fucking want, no matter what hood you're coming from or wherever you are. So this is such an inspiration. Your story is such an inspiration. You're such a light. So thank you.
Thank you.
Now, when we talk about community, you're a community organizer. I want to know, because you are in Harlem, you're in Miami, and you also say New Orleans, right? And I'm a person, yes, after COVID, we went into the virtual world, but I'm a person who likes in person, like being with the community, like the meetups, the fundraising, coming to events like this and meeting different people. So how does that work when you live in different states, especially when sometimes, you want to bring all your entire community together of different corners, and you don't want to be like, I'm giving too much on this community and less on this community because I'm here. So how do you navigate that?
When it comes to where I am personally, to be honest, community for me is in person, but community is also understanding that I'm an introvert. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, in New York, where I'm from, my friends and family are there. And it's a lot easier for me to be social with people that I've, known and grown up with. I really look at it more in regard of how can I be of service and how am I being served when it comes to where I am. And so I never feel as though I'm pulled apart too often. For me, especially as a writer, this book was 4 years in the making. And I write about the fact that during COVID, I went into an extreme isolation mode, and I was living by myself, and I was living in Little Havana, not speaking Spanish in a Spanish-speaking community. And that resulted in a very long-term social deprivation. So for someone who was already an introvert and enjoyed being a recluse and enjoyed being kind of pulled in, for me, the challenge really is about being a little bit more accessible.
Gotcha.
And so even in these events, I'm very grateful to tell my story is sometimes a bit of a gift and a curse, because as the reviews come in and the interviews, it gives me an opportunity to share what's in the book, but then it also leaves me vulnerable again, because, to write it is one thing, in print is one thing, to speak it, absolutely. I had
because when you're speaking, you're reliving everything.
I'm reliving it, and then there's the aspect of having it boomeranged back to you and that reflection. Hood Wellness early on earned a Kirkus review, and in that review, it discussed the fact that I had challenges with mental health and substance abuse, and that I had dentures. And, it was a beautiful review. As far as I was concerned, I sound like an extra from Law and Order. I was like, oh my God, is this, and I get reviews sometimes, and sometimes they focus on one aspect and another aspect. And it's in those moments when I remember, I think the term is called the death of an author, where essentially there's what I said and there's how I see it, but I'm not sitting with you when you're reading it. So I can't predict, and your interpretation is no less or more than what my intention was. And so I think for me that goes back with community in being seen, because I'm like a lot of Black women in the sense that I'm coming up to be of service. And when you are that individual that is carrying a lot of that weight, you are often on the receiving end of doing. And so for myself, I think that it was in the process of writing Hood Wellness where it was kind of like, I don't have to be that person anymore. I'm not going to be defined and loved and valued based on what I'm giving everybody else. It's actually going to be the other way around. I am as I am, and so I'm no longer going to perform. And so I say all that to say that it kind of balances itself out organically wherever I am, because the system has become such where it is more of being of service and need opposed to of performance.
I love that, and that's so true. And I always say that if you're in the right community or building the right community, they understand.
Yeah.
They support no matter what. So, being a Black Writers Weekend and you being a speaker, author, what advice would you give to a writer just getting started in their journey right now?
It's so funny you asked me that, because yesterday in my Uber, I was picked up by a Black woman who had 1,000 questions for me simply because she's seen the venue, right? And I get in the car and she's like, what do you all do? What did you do in there? What was the point? How did you move the books? And I was like, lady, what is it you, home. Yeah. I was like, what is it that you really want to know? And when she bottom lined it, essentially, she has this story and she's written a lot of it down. And in her mind, now I need a proofreader and now I need to do this. And I remember years ago, I used to try to figure it out in my head as well. Will I write it, and then I get it to Oprah, and then Oprah tell everybody, and then that's it, I made it. And the reality is, like so many of us, we have already tried to come up with what it looks like. But the truth of the matter is, this is an industry that has already kind of shut us off of a lot of resources, of a lot of knowledge, of a lot of opportunities. Yet we still have a lot of it. And even this Black Writers Weekend is evidence of the fact that we have everything that we need to get on the bookshelf, to get on the bestsellers list, to get reviewed, to go from book to film, from book to show. However you want it to be, you can have that. But it does require actually getting out of that idea that you had in your head on how it's going to work. Because ultimately, I'm a high school dropout. I did not go to a HBCU. I don't have any connections worth noting. What I have is a skill and a hunger to learn and the capacity to network. And so a lot of it looks like not just educating yourself on the industry, but also really bottom line, what are you trying to do? Are you so committed to being independently published that you don't need a book proposal? Are you so hungry for a book deal that you really need to know how to get in one of those publishing houses? A lot of times we are so specific with the idea of the book, yet so broad in how we see it happening that it doesn't connect. So my biggest advice would be to bottom line what you're trying to do, because ultimately there's a lot more resources and a lot more pathways than we realize.
I love that. And that's why we have places like this.
Exactly.
So get out of your house. So one thing I like about your personal quote is I dedicate this book to myself because I put in the work. And I love it because every time people ask me about my podcast, who's your avatar? Like, who is it for? I'm like, I'm selfish. This is for me because it really helps me heal. Mm-hmm. But if it does end up helping somebody else, that's a bonus. And with that, Ms. Tammy, thank you for hanging out with us. Please let the people know where they can find you, where they can get your book, how they can stay in touch. If you have any amazing project you want them to know about or follow up.
So they can find my book wherever books are sold, as well as most online spaces. And you can follow me as She Writes to Live. I'm more of an Instagram girl than an X girl, but you can find me on Instagram. And I am currently facilitating free classes, group classes for writers, where we do virtual writing meetups. And so I would suggest them to follow me there, where you can get information on that.
There you go. Free resources, y'all. Better jump on that. Thank you very much. And thank you to our amazing sponsors and partners, Afros and Audios, IKEA Ocean, Amazon KDP, All Americans Vote, Delphine Legacy Media, and Riverside Epicenter. Your support makes this event possible. Don't forget to follow Black Writers Weekend on all social medias at Black Writers Weekend, and join the conversation using the hashtag BWW bookmarked on social, and see what everybody has been up to this weekend. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your weekend.